Tonight,
Iran is responsible for the attacks that occurred in the Gulf.
caught red-handed. The U.S. says surveillance video shows Iran was involved in those oil tanker attacks in the Middle East.
I'll try not to get emotional because I know that crying can make us look weak sometimes, right?
And the president's rock is on her way out. Our look back at the legacy of White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. And America's Catholic bishops hold a major meeting to confront the clergy sex abuse crisis rocking the Catholic Church.
I was blinded right away.
Plus, the miracle that saved one congressman's eyesight. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. New video from the Pentagon points to Iran in the recent oil tanker attacks. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. That video appearing to prove Iran is behind these latest attacks on 2 commercial oil tankers.
Even with the potential evidence, Iran maintains it had nothing to do with it. CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips has the latest developments.
This makes 6 attacks on commercial vessels off the coast of Iran in the last month and a half. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the president himself not mincing words on who's to blame. I spoke with a military expert who says the video you're about to see is akin to a child getting their hand caught in the cookie jar. You're looking at an American military video that officials say shows the crew of an Iranian vessel attempting to recover an unexploded mine from the hull of a Japanese tanker. These pictures, taken by the U.S. Navy, show exactly where the mines were placed. About 45 minutes earlier, a Norwegian tanker came under attack also in the Gulf of Oman and caught fire. Iran's president denying involvement in any of it. President Trump said on Fox and Friends he isn't buying it.
Well, Iran did do it, and you know they did it because you saw the boat. I guess one of the mines didn't explode, and it's probably got essentially Iran written all over it.
The crew of the Japanese tanker, seen here receiving treatment from American sailors, was picked up by the USS Bainbridge after an urgent race to recover the 21 men. The limpet mines, held in place by magnets, designed to disable but not sink the vessels. Eerily similar to attacks on 4 commercial vessels last month in the same region. Iran denying all involvement.
I don't need to be Perry Mason to figure this one out.
Bradley Bowman is a former U.S. Army pilot and national security advisor in the U.S. Senate. He highly suspects Iran's involvement.
The Trump administration recently designated the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a foreign terrorist organization, and Tehran, jumped and wailed about that and said how horrible that was. Well, how have they responded? With more terrorism.
Bowman says this latest act is par for the course.
Their whole normal modus operandi is to work asymmetrically through proxies, which allows them to advance their interests but avoid attribution and retribution. And if this is the IRGC directly doing this, then I think it could be accurately characterized as an escalation.
Iran is calling the U.S. claims unfounded and part of the Trump administration's Iranophobic campaign. Despite any rhetoric, Bowman says he believes the diplomatic approach the White House is taking is the right one to get Iran back to the negotiation table and talking about a new nuclear deal. In Washington, Eric Phillips, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Eric. Well, at the White House, Sarah Sanders has become an icon in her role as press secretary.
That's right, but she's leaving that position at the end of the month and heading home, which leaves the door wide open for a hard-to-fill role. CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now to take a look at her legacy. Abigail?
After nearly 2 years as White House press secretary, Sarah Sanders is saying goodbye and heading back to Arkansas.
This has been the honor of a lifetime.
In an emotional farewell,
I couldn't be prouder to have had the opportunity to serve my country and particularly to work for this president. I've loved every minute, even the hard minutes.
Sanders explained it's time for her to devote time to another important job, being a mom.
I have 3 amazing kids, and I'm going to spend a little more time with them.
She talked about that inner struggle with CBN News earlier this year.
Do you struggle with mommy guilt?
Oh, every single day. I mean, one of the hardest things I do every day is just go to work. My kids are clinging to me, crying, "Why are you leaving? Why do you have to work?" And to explain to a 6, 5, and 3-year-old what you do and why it's important is nearly impossible.
She also described the often contentious relationship with the press corps.
I mean, you see a lot of angry faces, people that their sole purpose is to find this gotcha moment, to catch you. Their job is not to get information, which is what the briefing is supposed to be. It's to trip you up.
And how faith helped make the difference for her while on the job.
You know, some people want to say you can separate your faith from your work. I feel very much the opposite of that. I think your faith defines who you are, and I'm certainly not going to shy away from that.
As one of the president's closest advisors,
she's done an incredible job. We've been through a lot together, and she's tough, but she's good.
She was almost always by his side.
If we can get her to run for the governor of Arkansas, I think she'll do very well, and I'm trying to get her to do that.
Sanders hasn't announced much yet about what's to come, but says she will be one of the most outspoken and loyal supporters of the president and his agenda.
All right, Abigail Robertson, thank you very much. Well, to election 2020. Tonight, the lineup is set for the first Democratic debate. The 2020 candidates divided into 2 groups that will take the stage on back-to-back nights. In the first group, Cory Booker, Julian Castro, Bill de Blasio, John Delaney, Tulsi Gabbard, Jay Inslee, Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, Tim Ryan, and Elizabeth Warren. That is happening June 26th in Miami. And in Group 2, Michael Bennet, Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, John Hickenlooper, Bernie Sanders, Eric Swalwell, Marianne Williamson, and Andrew Yang. NBC is hosting the debate both nights. Campaign officials took part in a random lottery drawing to make that lineup.
And here with us now are Clarence Page, syndicated columnist with the Chicago Tribune, and our very own chief political analyst, David Brody. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, guys.
Question for the both of you. Starting with you, Clarence, your thoughts about the candidate lineup and how they're split up between the 2 nights.
I wish we had the primaries a little quicker so that we don't have to memorize so many names. But it's going to be interesting. I noticed they are, though, diplomatically dividing the 2 nights dividing the front runners between 2 nights. And that's important. So they don't get the feeling of an A team or a B team. The viewers are more inclined to watch both nights, too. And I expect a marathon session, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. This reminds me of like the NBA lottery with the ping pong balls and who gets what. This bodes well for Elizabeth Warren on that first night. I mean, she's going to be pretty much the main contender of the top contenders on stage. Beto O'Rourke, a challenge for him from a policy standpoint. He's going to have to be on his game to go head-to-head with Elizabeth Warren. Second night, obviously, that's the varsity game right there.
How closely do you think President Trump will be watching?
Oh, I think he'll be watching. You know, if he's watching Beto O'Rourke's official announcement in San Antonio or wherever it was down in Texas, El Paso, he'll be watching this. He's not just the president who we talked about. He literally is a political commentator as well, and he'll definitely be watching. And I think if he's going to pick up on Beto O'Rourke's hand gestures, I can guarantee you he's going to be picking up on a few other things that night too.
The president, we heard, phoned into Fox and Friends this morning and appeared to be a little bit on damage control for his comments that he made earlier in the week about accepting dirt from foreign countries. Your thoughts on the damage control we saw this morning?
You know, the more I cover the Trump administration, the more I'm reminded of covering City Hall in Chicago in the old days, you know, because this is one of those situations where you ask a newsmaker a question and they actually make the mistake of being a little too candid for public consumption, where, you know, Mr. Trump naturally thinks of this dirt on the opposing campaign as being part of the game. You try to find out what you can. Oppo research, as he called it the other day, and that is what it is called normally. When we talk about a foreign power, that's a whole different ball game. And I think he probably got briefed overnight by somebody or figured out that this was not playing like he had hoped it would, and so he softened his earlier statement.
Yeah, and I think Republicans were picking up the phone and calling him, saying, "You're giving us no place to go here. You're giving us no wiggle room. You got to dial that back." And he did, or at least he tried to do that in the way only Trump can do it, which is, I wasn't really sorry, but I'll amend it a little bit.
Yeah. Sarah Sanders, big news coming yesterday that she will be stepping down. David, you know her very well personally. You've interviewed her several times. What will her legacy be?
Well, I think there are two legacies. It depends who you talk to. Mainstream media will say, you know, she was not honest. She was the one that kind of destroyed the daily White House briefings, and she was testy with the press. So the question is, will that be the legacy that sticks? Then there's the other side of it, the conservative Christians, the evangelicals, and overall who thought she had class and smarts and bless your heart with a little bit of moxie and a snap thrown in. And that's the Sarah Sanders that I think a lot of the Trump supporters will see.
Yeah, I think she was a good public servant in the sense of being a servant to the president and his public, because she expressed his views quite well. And the White House press briefing, I hate to see it go, but President Trump didn't like it. He really likes to give his message directly, which raises the question about who's going to replace him. Whoever it is has to get used to the notion that President Trump likes to be his own press secretary. That's one more little rule or norm that he has broken, and it's disrupted things, but it's worked for him so far.
Do you think it'll be the new norm, whether it's, well, the Trump administration probably it will be the new norm, but if there's a new administration, will they follow that policy about discontinuing the press briefings?
Well, I think they'll pick them up again, if nothing more than to brown-nose the press, because a reporter like them. I personally, I mean, I'd love to know how you feel about it, but I personally learned very early on the press briefing was disappointing as far as I was concerned. I'm more accustomed to being, well, it's a great place to find out what the president's line is, the administration line, but independent reporting is where the big stories come from, and so I don't go to that many press briefings if I can avoid it.
Just a few seconds here, but David, any guess who might take her place?
Well, I think it's either going to be someone called No One, or it'll be a female of some sort. Maybe watch Kayleigh McEnany. We've been tossing that name around the newsroom a little bit today over at the, well, she was at the RNC, now in the Trump campaign. He likes her. She's very well spoken, very, very smart. I think it's going to be a woman or no one. How's that?
David and Clarence, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Well, coming up, what a major meeting of American Catholic bishops means for the future of the Catholic Church.
Welcome back. The Catholic Church has new procedures to deal with sexual abuse within their parishes. Catholic bishops meeting in Baltimore this week adopted a new process for reporting and investigating allegations that would hold bishops more accountable. Non-clergy will now be involved in allegations against high-ranking bishops rather than the Vatican dealing with them thousands of miles away in secrecy. Some have criticized the new plan because it didn't include procedures informing police when allegations come in from a new proposed tip line and essentially allows bishops to police themselves.
Well, Wyatt Goolsbee is a correspondent and anchor for the EWTN Global Catholic Network and covered the conference this week in Baltimore. Wyatt, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Talk about the importance of this conference.
This was a big conference for the U.S. Catholic bishops. They had wanted to address the sex abuse scandal in concrete ways, take concrete steps to address potential sex abuse by priests and potential cover-ups at the bishop level. So this was very critical. I would say the tone of the meetings this week was very serious, very focused on getting the job that they wanted to do done and addressing all of these really important issues.
Were there other issues outside of the church sex abuse that they addressed?
There were a number of issues, including vocations, including issues about the death penalty. One thing they had talked about was the role of millennials being involved in the church. Why are millennials leaving the church? And they talked about how it wasn't so much that they're switching religions or leaving Christianity, it's so much as they're just not going to church or not participating in faith in a certain way. And so one thing that they talked about was how can they bring millennials back? And it's a challenge, I think, for everybody, not just Catholics, but for churches everywhere.
Yeah, what are some of the ways they're talking about to bring back some of these people?
Well, they're talking about this actually at an intellectual level. They realize that they really can't talk down to millennials. Millennials are very smart, very intelligent, in many cases very well educated. And so they realize they can't necessarily come in trying to play this down as if this is a Bible coloring book. They need to address the serious theological issues. And they find when they do that and they're straightforward with why we believe what we do, then that tends to appeal more to people.
Wyatt, can you tell us a little bit more about the plan that the bishops came up with to address sex abuse within the church and how it might help heal the victims and also the church as well?
the bishops talked about a number of issues about how to address the crisis, and they voted on a number of topics, made concrete steps. One of those steps was to create a national third-party reporting system, a hotline, a phone number that people can call. And so that would be run by an independent third party where people can report a sex abuse, or they can report a potential cover-up, something that they might see as suspicious. And that way, the bishops realize, and I think everybody realized there this week, that bishops can't police bishops. They can't police themselves. They need other people involved than at simply the clergy level. And so all of the things that they voted on were reflective of that. I mentioned the hotline. Several other things they talked about was getting lay people involved. So like I said, so it's not just clergy. It's people who are professionals that might be involved with the church to help in terms of investigations. They also talked a little bit about getting civil authorities involved, whether it's local police, prosecutors, and they realize when it comes to any of these investigations, you have to have the local authorities on board.
Now, where does the Catholic Church, where does it go from here after this conversation this week? What's next?
The next is to try to put some of these plans into action. So like I said, I mentioned the hotline to you. The plan is to have that in place by May of next year. In addition, the idea is to try to form lay panels, lay commissions, if you will, of people at the local level across the country in order to be there and be at the ready in case there are accusations of abuse in the future. So the idea is to take all these things. There's also questions of standards. What are bishops supposed to do? How are they supposed to follow protocol? And then who do they report to if there's an abuse? So there's a wider regional bishops called a metropolitan bishop, which they're supposed to report to. And having all that in a concrete what to do step by step was important.
All right, Wyatt Goolsbee, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Still ahead, how a miracle saved this congressman and former Navy SEAL's eyesight.
Well, Texas Congressman Dan Crenshaw is one of the newest members of Congress, and he's quickly gaining national attention.
He sat down with the CBN's Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson to talk about the war injury that thrust him into the spotlight, the miracle that saved his eyesight, and how the GOP can work to take back the House in 2020.
Congressman Dan Crenshaw, whose district covers the outskirts of Houston, made national headlines even before he got to Washington, and saw an army of Americans rise to his defense after the former Navy SEAL found himself as the butt of a controversial joke.
You may be surprised to hear he's a congressional candidate from Texas and not a hitman in a porno movie.
But it was Crenshaw who had the last laugh.
Thanks for making a Republican look good.
Getting a rare apology from the long-running show.
I mean this from the bottom of my heart. It was a poor choice of words. The man is a war hero, and he deserves all the respect in the world.
You did 5 tours of duty.
We need a lot more Dan Crenshaw in our society.
And almost overnight, becoming a rising star in the GOP.
It did change my freshman year in Congress for sure. And, you know, it's usually the case is that you just try to keep your head down your freshman year, and I was just never given that opportunity.
Crenshaw sees it as a blessing, giving him a bigger voice to talk about key issues.
The left is really good at selling bad ideas, and the right is really bad at selling good ideas.
A former Navy SEAL, politics wasn't always in his career plan.
I never really wanted to leave the SEAL teams.
Life and plans changed after an IED blast in Afghanistan in 2012.
I was blinded right away.
Crenshaw managed to get himself to the helicopter.
They saw my condition, they immediately put me into a kind of medically induced coma.
Meanwhile, back home, Dan's family and now wife Tara were learning about the blast.
We knew that his right eye was gone. We knew that the other eye had been blinded.
We were hoping for a miracle. And eventually that miracle did happen in the operating room.
After surgeons saved his left eye, they discovered his retina had a hole in it.
So we're hoping for another miracle because, I mean, the conversation there was, okay, do you just let yourself go completely blind slowly and at least you'll get to see for a while longer? Or do we try this surgery out, which your eye is so fragile right now, it's a really bad idea.
But God performed that second miracle and saved his sight.
There's no other way to describe that except God giving me the strength to believe the impossible.
Needing to leave the military, but still wanting to serve his country, Crenshaw saw an opportunity with the retirement of Texas Congressman Ted Poe.
It was all history from there. Decided to go for it.
A key part of Crenshaw's brand, authenticity.
We've created this mess, and we get the politicians we deserve.
Instead of always hosting traditional town halls, Crenshaw takes different approaches, like talking to constituents over games of foosball.
I'm pretty good at foosball, so I can fend off most people, although there were some experts who came in and just took me to town.
Where winners get Astros tickets.
This job can wear you down, so you might as well have fun.
What do you think the Republican Party needs to do heading into 2020 to win back control of the House?
There's a lot of opportunity for Republicans to take the center. When Democrats are proposing things like a Green New Deal or Medicare for All, and proposing that they take away your private insurance, it's very obvious to regular people that they've gone in a radical direction that will not work.
The congressman maintains Republicans need to answer for these plans instead of just criticizing them.
We need to do a better job informing people what is actually happening.
Such as opposing the Unborn Child Protection Act.
It's not about abortion at all. It's about a baby that is alive, just like any other baby. It's outside the womb. And deserves the same medical care that any other human being would get.
As for potential bipartisanship, Crenshaw is skeptical.
Their base is so mad. I've never seen people so angry and hating conservatives.
And believes politicians need to stop adding poison pills to bipartisan issues.
Let's pass things out of the House that will actually go somewhere. I think that's what people want.
Congressman Crenshaw tells me he hopes to continue serving his country for many years to come. As one of the most recognizable millennials in the GOP, he could be a factor in helping Republicans reach younger generations. Reporting from Houston, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Next, why it's a big day for the president, the country, and the Army. We'll explain when we come back.
Well, tonight we celebrate Flag Day, marking a number of American moments. The president's 73rd birthday today is also the 244th birthday of the U.S. Army.
From the surface of the moon to the top of Mount Suribachi during the Battle of Iwo Jima in World War II, the flag has flown in some of the hardest to reach places on Earth. The United States Continental Congress formally adopted the Stars and Stripes back in 1777. Tonight, we remember the sacrifices behind Old Glory. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.